There's a quiet, almost taboo truth about life that most people only whisper to themselves when the lights are out and the world has gone to sleep. I thought I have to have it all figured out by now. We imagine our 20s and 30s as the decades when we are supposed to build the life we want, the career, the relationship, the identity, the sense of self. And yet, for many, somewhere around 40, an unsettling realization emerges. The life we've built doesn't quite fit the person we've become. Carl Jung once wrote, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning." In his view, our first decades are often spent building a mask, the persona, the face we show to the world. But at some point, usually around midlife, something deeper begins to stir. The mask starts to crack. The outer roles and identities that once felt solid begin to feel, this is not failure. This is an awakening. Historically, thinkers like Aristotle and Marcus Aurelius spoke of life in seasons that we are meant to ripen, to move from the ambition and striving of youth toward a deeper, quieter wisdom. Jung took this further, suggesting that at midlife, the task of the soul changes entirely from building a life to integrating a self. But here lies the tension. Society celebrates beginnings, the college years, the first job, the young family, yet treats midlife as decline, a slow fading. Young rejected that entirely. For him, life truly begins at 40, because only then do we have enough experience to see past illusions, to reconcile with our shadow, and to step into who we were always meant to become. In this journey, we will explore 6 key insights drawn from Jung, from ancient philosophy, and from modern psychology that reveal why midlife is not an ending, but a profound beginning. By the end, you may discover that the years ahead are not about reliving the energy of youth, but embracing a deeper, more authentic vitality, one that was impossible to find before now. Imagine you're in a theater. The lights are low, the stage is set, and you step into the spotlight wearing a mask. For years, you've worn it so naturally that you've almost forgotten it's there. The mask tells the audience, and perhaps even you, who you are: the dependable one, the ambitious one, the charming one, the strong one. Through your 20s and 30s, the mask works. It opens doors, helps you navigate the world, allows you to fit into the roles that life demands. This mask is what Carl Jung called the persona, the social face we craft to meet the expectations of others. It's not a lie exactly, it's a curated truth. But then, somewhere around midlife, something unexpected happens. You feel a subtle unease, as though the mask has begun to press too tightly against your skin. The laughter you give at parties feels a little forced. The professional achievements that once thrilled you now feel strangely hollow. Even your relationships, while stable, may carry a quiet sense of distance. Jung believed this was inevitable. The persona, he said, is necessary in our youth. It's how we learn to operate in the world. But if we cling to it for too long, it begins to suffocate us. What once protected us now limits us. Like a snake outgrowing its skin, we start to feel restless, irritable, uncertain. This is not a failure of character. It is a signal that the self you built in the morning of life is no longer large enough to contain who you are becoming. The mask, once a useful tool, becomes a prison when we mistake it for our true face. Socrates warned, the unexamined life is not worth living. At 40, this examination becomes urgent. We are called to look beneath the mask, to ask not, what do I appear to be, but who am I? when no one is watching. And here is the paradox: removing the mask can feel like losing yourself, but in truth, it is the first step toward finally meeting yourself. There comes a time in life, often quietly, without warning, when the things you've pushed aside start pushing back. Maybe it's an old resentment you thought you'd forgiven, a fear you thought you'd outgrown, a desire you thought you'd buried. They return in strange ways, in dreams that unsettle you, in irritations that seem disproportionate, in a vague restlessness that haunts even the most comfortable moments. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or hide because they don't fit the image we want to show the world. These are not only our vices, but also our disowned strengths, passions, and truths. In the first half of life, we can often keep the shadow in check. We distract ourselves with ambition, with family responsibilities, with the endless busyness that modern life rewards. But somewhere around 40, the shadow grows impatient. It begins to knock louder. This is not mere midlife crisis. It is the psyche's demand for wholeness. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." At midlife, the unconscious seems determined to be heard. The process is rarely comfortable. It might come as sudden anger you can't explain, or a longing for something you can't name, or a confrontation with your own hypocrisy. Many resist this moment, doubling down on the mask, clinging to old roles, numbing themselves with distraction. But the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It waits, and with each year, its call becomes harder to silence. The ancient Greeks knew this truth in another form. They told stories of heroes who ventured into the underworld, not to escape it, but to retrieve something essential. In the same way, facing the shadow is a descent. You must go into the darkness of your own mind, meet the figures you have exiled, and ask, what part of me have I been afraid to see? It is here that true transformation begins, because when you can face your shadow without flinching, you no longer live in fear of yourself. And that freedom, though hard won, is the kind that changes everything. In our younger years, achievement feels like oxygen. We chase titles, accolades, promotions, recognition, not always because we truly want them, but because we've been taught they matter. The first half of life is often spent climbing ladders, both visible and invisible, driven by the belief that once we reach the top, we'll finally feel complete. But something shifts around midlife. You reach a plateau where the next rung doesn't excite you the way it used to. The applause feels softer, the trophy gathers dust faster, the dream job starts to feel like just a job. Carl Jung believed this was no accident. He saw achievement as a crucial part of the first half of life. It builds confidence, discipline, and skill. But past a certain point, its power fades because it no longer answers the deeper question pressing at the edges of your mind: why am I here? The Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, observed that those who endured were not necessarily the strongest, but those who had meaning, a why to live for. He wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." At 40, many realize they've built a successful outer life, but a neglected inner one. And here, ancient wisdom speaks to us again. Aristotle called it eudaimonia, not happiness as fleeting pleasure, but the deep fulfillment that comes from living in harmony with your highest virtues. Meaning rarely comes from status, It comes from contribution. It comes from living in alignment with values you would hold even if no one were watching. It comes from choosing work, relationships, and ways of living that express the truth of who you are becoming, rather than the image you've been trying to maintain. And here is the beautiful irony. When achievement serves meaning, it becomes more powerful and more satisfying than when it served ego. At 40 and beyond, life invites us to stop proving ourselves and start expressing ourselves. So the question shifts from what do I want to be known for to what do I want to be here for? And the answer to that question is where the second half of life truly begins. At some point after 40, time begins to change its shape. The years ahead no longer feel endless. They have edges now, a visible horizon. You begin to notice how quickly the seasons turn, how friends' children grow taller between visits, how the people you love are aging alongside you, and sometimes you notice how quietly death walks among us, not to terrify, but to remind. For much of life, we live as though we have all the time in the world. We put off dreams until later, assuming there will always be a later. But at midlife, something subtle shifts. You start to sense that later is not guaranteed. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." To him, the awareness of mortality was not morbid, but clarifying. It stripped away trivialities and revealed what actually mattered. Centuries later, the existential philosopher Martin Heidegger called this being toward death, the idea that we live most authentically when we keep our finitude in view. For Heidegger, this wasn't about obsession with death, but about living more vividly because we know it will end. Carl Jung echoed this, seeing midlife as the moment we turn from the illusion of infinite tomorrows to the reality of a finite number of meaningful days. And in that turn, life takes on a sharper, richer flavor. When you dance with mortality, you start to ask different questions. If I have fewer days ahead than behind, how do I want to spend them? What will I regret leaving undone, unsaid, unlived? This awareness can be sobering, but it can also be liberating. It frees you from the trivial battles that once consumed you. It urges you to make the phone call, to take the trip, to begin the work that truly matters. The truth is, every conversation, every sunset, every chance to hold someone you love is a finite offering. Knowing this doesn't diminish life, it illuminates it. And at 40, the invitation is clear. Stop treating your days as endless and start treating them as precious. There is a moment in every deep life journey when you realize you are not simply one thing. You're both light and shadow, strength and fragility, joy and sorrow. You're capable of tenderness and ferocity, humility and pride, hope and despair, often in the same breath. In our youth, we tend to live in extremes. We chase only the positive emotions, reject the negative, cling to success, and deny failure. We divide the world into good and bad, us and them, what belongs and what must be cast away. But Jung believed that wholeness is not found in perfection, it is found in integration. This is the process he called individuation, the lifelong work of uniting the many parts of the self into a harmonious whole. The ancients hinted at this truth in their own way. The Taoist symbol of yin and yang shows light and dark swirling into one another, each containing a seed of its opposite. The Greeks spoke of the coincidentia oppositorum, the union of opposites. In both visions, the goal is not to destroy contrast, but to let opposites coexist without tearing you apart. At midlife, this work becomes urgent. By 40, you've lived long enough to see that life is rarely either, it is both and. You've felt joy in the middle of grief, peace in the middle of uncertainty, love in the middle of loss, and perhaps you've begun to sense that resisting one half of the spectrum robs you of the other. To integrate is to welcome the parts of yourself you once exiled, to let ambition walk hand in hand with contentment, to allow vulnerability to strengthen rather than weaken you, to make peace with the fact that you will never be only one thing, and that this is the very source of your depth. Jung warned that those who cling only to their light become brittle, and those who embrace only their darkness become lost. True freedom is to hold both without needing either to vanish. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. Life stops being a battlefield of opposites and becomes a dance, one where the steps are improvised, but the rhythm feels eternal. Most people think of life as having only one true beginning, the moment we arrive in the world, helpless and unshaped. But Carl Jung saw something different. He believed that somewhere in the middle of life, if we are willing, we are offered a second chance at being born, not into a new body, but into a truer self. The first birth is physical. It throws us into the chaos of the world, where we spend decades learning to survive, to adapt, to play by the rules. This first half of life is about building an identity, a career, a place in society. But all of that is scaffolding, necessary but temporary. Then comes the moment, sometimes gradual, sometimes explosive, when you feel the scaffolding no longer holds you. This is the crisis so many fear at midlife. But what if it's not a crisis at all? What if it's the labor pains of a second birth? The second birth is conscious. You are no longer a blank slate. You arrive carrying decades of memory, scars, and wisdom. You no longer believe you are immortal, so every choice carries more weight. You have seen enough of yourself to know what you cannot pretend to be anymore. In this birth, you choose differently. You stop living to satisfy the expectations of a crowd and begin living in alignment with the voice within. You shed the borrowed dreams and start crafting your own. You become less concerned with how life looks from the outside and more devoted to how it feels from the inside. Jung wrote, thoroughly unprepared, we take the step into the afternoon of life, and worse still, we take the step with the false assumption that our truths and ideals will serve us as hitherto. The second birth requires that you surrender those old truths, not to be left empty, but to be made new. And when you emerge from this threshold, you are not simply older, you are freer, you are more whole, and for the first time, perhaps, you are truly alive. So here we are, at the edge of a truth Carl Jung knew well. Life does not end at 40. It does not even begin to fade. It begins in a way it never could before. We have traveled through 6 insights together. The mask we outgrow, when the identity we built in youth becomes too small to contain the person we are becoming. The shadow knocks louder when the hidden parts of ourselves demand to be seen, no matter how inconvenient. Meaning over achievement, when the hunger for status fades and the thirst for purpose takes its place. The dance with mortality, when the horizon of life sharpens and every day becomes more precious. The integration of opposites, When we finally see that wholeness is not perfection, but the harmony of contradictions, the second birth. When we step into life's afternoon, not as a slow decline, but as a conscious, deliberate rebirth. These are not just ideas, they are invitations. Because at 40, you're not being asked to cling to the life you've built, nor to burn it all down. You're being asked to step into a deeper relationship with yourself, one where you stop mistaking the mask for the face, the title for the truth, the years behind you for the only years that matter. The afternoon of life, Jung taught, requires different truths than the morning. It asks for honesty, for courage, for the willingness to turn inward even as the world continues to pull you outward. And so I leave you with this. If you knew your life had just begun, how would you live? If you understood that the days ahead are not leftovers, but the main course, what would you do differently? If you could meet the person you are becoming, the one who waits for you beyond fear, beyond pretense, would you take that first step toward them today? This is your second birth, and the world needs the version of you that only emerges when you stop trying to be who you were and start becoming who you are. If this journey has resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe, to share your thoughts, and to continue walking with us. Every week we explore these questions, not as strangers, but as fellow travelers in the strange, beautiful work of becoming whole. Life really begins at 40, and yours begins